Sami Womack from A Sunny Side Up Life began her debt-free journey with a debt price tag of $490,000. Over a 6-year journey, her and her family became debt-free, cash flowed an SUV, a truck, 2 boats, an RV, and now have purchased their 18 acres of property to build their dream home. We're here with Sami today to talk about her debt-free journey. How are you doing today, Sami?
I'm good.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Yes, thanks for having me.
So Sami, like you said, you had almost $500,000 in debt. So at the beginning of this journey, how long did you expect it would take you to pay off all of your debt?
We really had kind of a crazy up and down journey. We have 3 kids now, but kind of like my rock bottom moment was I was a couple of days away from having our second daughter, and my husband was on the other side of the country. He was working in New York at the time, and we're in Texas. And we had to max out our very last credit card, go over the limit for him to fly home for her to be born. And it was just kind of this moment where we were just like, what in the world are we doing with our life? How are we raising kids and acting like this? And then about the time my daughter was 9 months old, we kind of started to like, okay, we've really got to change. We've really got to do something. And then it still took another 3 months for me to be brave enough to add up our debt. So I kind of sort of budgeted for like 3 months and then added up our debt, and it was $490,000. And that was 3 pieces of real estate. It was like credit cards, it was medical bills, it was property taxes, it was all kinds of things. Our original goal was just kind of get the credit cards paid off, get the medical bills paid off, and kind of just get our head above water. And then we were going to just save for a nice down payment on our SUV. Like we never planned to cash flow it. Because we just thought like that's something rich people do. Like we were raised thinking like, oh, you'll always have a car payment. Oh, you're only mortgage free when you're like in your 60s or 70s. That's not something young, normal people do. And we didn't think we would ever be 100% debt free. But the more we got into the journey, the more it started to seem doable. And then we were like, we can just save a little bit longer and cash flow this vehicle. And then like we can sell this real estate and that will be paid off. And then it just kind of went from there. And here we are 6 years later.
I know you talk a lot about budgeting, but besides budgeting, what was like the most crucial part in staying successful for you on this journey?
So I think budgeting is just really the tip of the iceberg when it comes to really being successful and staying successful long term. I think what a lot of people miss is the mindset work that has to go into it, the feeling like you're worthy of actually achieving it. And like for us, we thought, oh, we're just normal people. Like we're not anyone that should be special enough or successful enough to be 100% debt free. So that was like a mindset shift for us that we had to work through. And there's a lot of hard work, I think, that goes into it. It's a lot of forgiving yourself for all of your past mistakes and realizing that like you're allowed to grow, you're allowed to change, you're allowed to mature. Instead of just, I feel like a lot of people will just sit there and beat themselves up for all of the past mistakes that they made. And so there is a lot of mindset work and heart work that has to go into it that kind of like lays that foundation. And I think that is what ultimately makes you long-term successful.
So saying that, would you say the mindset was the most difficult part? If not, maybe give some advice or give some insight as to what was the most difficult part, because viewers are going to be watching this that can absolutely relate to your story. So what would be the most challenging part of paying off your debt? What was the most challenging part of this journey for you and your family?
In terms of like comparison, and I feel like this generation, we have grown up most of our lives with social media. We know everything about everybody. And so it's constantly in our face. It's constantly what everyone else is doing. So I think for me, part of it was comparing myself to what everyone else is doing. Everyone's going to think we're broke. Look at how this looks. Look at how our house looks. Because now we are in a 2-bedroom rent house on the older part of town. And when we were in debt, we were in a gorgeous 3,200 square foot house in the country with land and like all this stuff. And that looked so much better on social media. But like at the end of the day, what actually feels good. And so it was a lot of that, like, what do I actually want? And so for us, that was that was harder than I think sticking to a grocery budget, because I feel like anybody can do that. But to be long-term successful, it really is a lot of the mindset work.
With that being said, like, do you feel like being debt-free has changed your life?
Oh yeah. Like, I think basically our life is 90% different. I mean, I have the same husband. He has the same career. We have the same kids. Other than that, pretty much everything is different. We have like completely adopted minimalism. We have just changed how we live our daily life, like how much time we spend together. We put our focus on quality time. We put our focus on like what actually feels good to do. And we have stepped away from the hustle, the busy, the, keeping up with everyone else. And I feel like all of that kind of just fell into place as we kind of went through this journey and grew along the way.
So what advice do you have for others watching this today? Advice that they could relate to their own story?
I went back and I tracked like the past 3 months, and I got a good average of like what we were spending on restaurants, what we were spending on groceries. And then I made it my goal to beat my numbers. And so that also kind of played into not worrying about what everyone else was doing. Everyone's not on the same diet you are. Everybody might not have 3 kids like I do. Our grocery budgets are different. Our restaurants are different. Like everything's different. So try to beat your numbers.
What about your husband? I think people would want to know kind of his perspective. What was his mindset going into all of this?
It took a little bit longer because he does work really hard, and he was like, I want to enjoy, the fruits of my labor. So it took a little bit to kind of get him on board with that mindset. And he started to see like, oh, we're going to have smaller treats, like cheaper things to look forward to, not like $60,000 trucks. And now I think really what helped was I asked him, where do you want to be in 10 years? Like, what are your dreams? What are your goals? And it is what we're almost to, building our dream house, having 18 acres, having land and all this stuff. That was both of our dream. And I'm like, okay, how can we get there? And we kind of like laid out that map and like, let's keep dreaming together. We got to focus. Like anytime we would be like, we got to focus. And that was along the way, that was his truck. Along the way, that was his boat. That was, and that kind of helped keep him focused as we went.
Yeah, building that map definitely puts it into perspective, like really what needs to happen to get to that point. So yeah, thanks so much for coming on today, Sami.
Thank you.